owns the mortuary, and that is a messy family. And that also, for my money, has the greatest final episode of any TV series ever.
It's incredible. It's funny you say, I'm just watching True Blood for the first time right now, so I'm on the Alan Ball train.
Okay.
A thing I love about the 6 Feet Under family that I think they share with the Starlings is that we sort of get invested in each individual member of the family on their own and all of their secrets, and then we are invested in them as a group as well. And I wondered if you could talk about sort of how you went about tackling all the different members of the family as sort of individuals versus as, I don't know, I guess a collective identity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important for me that they each have their own individual. So there's a lot of drama in the book, right? There's a lot of plot lines because I wanted them each to have their individual thing they're struggling with, their own secret. There's also sort of a conflict in each relationship, whether it's between the siblings, between the in-laws, between each parent and child. But then also I wanted there to be like a single family dilemma. And in this case, there are two. There's the fact that the family is selling their treasured family double-wide trailer that they call the cabin on the woods. One son is fine with this. The other son wants to keep the house and the family. And then the other is that, this novel opens with a tragedy, and they all witness this tragedy. And even though the tragedy is outside of the family, it becomes the catalyst for exploring all their own personal tragedies that they're pretending aren't happening, because they can't ignore this thing that does happen right in front of them.
That's so interesting, the idea of an unignorable thing being used to sort of flesh out the things they would prefer to keep hidden. I wonder, could I bother you to maybe read a little bit of the opening, just because I feel like to hear, I don't know, I think it's a really interesting start to a novel, and I'd love for us to talk about it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So I won't read the whole first chapter because it'll take a while, but I'll read the first, say, 3 pages. So this is the beginning of Lake Life. So there are, as CJ said, there's 6 characters in Lake Life. There are the parents, Richard and Lisa. There are their 2 grown sons in their 30s, Michael and Thad. And then there's Thad's boyfriend, Jake, and Michael's wife, Diane. The opening chapter is from Michael's point of view. He's the eldest son. He's also kind of the most difficult person to spend time with in the novel. It's not a head you want to spend a lot of time in. And so, but for whatever reason, he's the first character who gets to talk. So he, just fair warning, it's not he's an interesting guy. Chapter 1, and this is Michael. The boy on the back of the boat laughing, the sky pewter-stamped and threatening rain. Michael Starling, age 33, warm on his father's boat, watches the other boat, the boy, the bay, the water that will never be his because Michael's parents are selling the house. Yesterday they arrived, Michael and Diane, Jake and Thad, and were given the news that Richard and Lisa Starling will not be retiring to the lake. In a week, the Starling family summer home will be sold so that Michael and Thad's parents may retire instead to a pocket of Florida shore that screams margaritas and sand and all things distinctly un-Starling. This decision is not like Michael's parents. They're not Florida people. They're ex-hippies, academics. They're lovers of cold mountain lakes and clear, cool streams, of trees that change color in the fall. Their summers are North Carolina summers, starry skies, and the converted double-wide the family calls its cabin in the woods. What has become of Michael's parents? Who are these brave fools who splash before him, bobbing in swimsuits and inner tubes in the calm waters of a Lake Christopher summer day? On shore, a heron picks through reeds for fish. Above, clouds cover and uncover the sun. A morning on the lake, sandwiches, swimming, this was the Starlings' plan before the rogue vessel arrived, unzipping the water behind it. Never mind swimmers or the bays enforced no wake speed. The boat dropped anchor too close, and the man at the wheel uncovered his head and waved a hat, a captain's hat, from the deck. He whooped, spat a wad of tobacco overboard, and turned up his music very, very loud. This is not good lake etiquette. This is not done. Lake Christopher is not a party lake, and this is not a noisy bay. Longtime residents work hard to keep it that way, having survived decades of development. and 2 challenges, one public, one private, of eminent domain. The interloper boat blasts Jimmy Buffett, the party barge stenciled pink on its side. Its pontoons gleam gray under a gray sky. Michael's father doesn't mind. "Join us," he calls to the man with the captain's hat. Then everyone from the party barge is in the water, all but the boy. "Swimmers here," his mother says, a shame, and his older sister left aboard to watch him. Soon, though, the sister is under the canopy on her back on the deck of the boat, eyes closed, earbuds in. Michael watches the boy and wants a drink. The boy is 4, maybe 5. Where his biceps should be are pumpkin-colored water wings. He moves to the outboard motor, then straddles the cover, a jockey in silver swim trunks. His horse is tattooed Evan Rude. "Giddy up," he screams. Some people might find this cute. Michael does not. The inflatables bulge like blood pressure cuffs around the boy's arms. One hand releases an invisible rein, and the boy minds a bag of Cheetos in his lap. He turns his head to observe his sister in the boat, his parents swimming 50 yards away. Michael follows the boy's line of sight. When he looks back, he finds a finger. It is a middle finger, the signature neon of Cheetos, and it is raised in Michael's direction. Michael shuts his eyes. Why is he watching over this kid? He doesn't even like kids. He opens his eyes and the boy sticks out his tongue. "Hey," Michael wants to call to the negligent parents. "Your shitty kid is giving me the finger and your other shitty kid is asleep." Michael should be swimming, but his head has bats in it. Sobriety is wings in the skull, its echolocation behind the eyes. He needs vodka, but this morning he woke to an empty orange juice jug and no way to sneak liquor onto the boat. His family will put up with a lot, but not vodka before noon. The boy raises the chip bag to his mouth, and his chin and chest are dusted orange. Then he drops the bag into the lake. He stares at Michael, daring him to speak. So I'll stop there. But as you can imagine, nothing good is about to happen to the boy.
Very, very little good. I think one of the things about this opening, first of all, I just love that you opened the book with this man who's like, "I don't like kids. This kid is annoying. This kid is flipping." It's a bold way to start the book, and I find it thrilling, and it makes me as a reader just be like, I am here for the ride of this book. But there's a lot of language about what is unstarling or what is not done on the lake, and I think all of us have in our families, whether we acknowledge it or not, there are rules that are specific to our family about like who we are and what we do as members of our family. Could you talk a little bit about what it means to the starlings to be starling or not starling, and this idea of what is and is not done?
Yeah, I think that language is most important to Michael. He sees the world very much in black and white, what is right and what is wrong, what should and shouldn't be done. And it's not till the end of the novel that kind of gets challenged and cracks that open for him. But I mean, I think each of the starlings kind of has their own moral code and their own compass they live by. But yeah, for Michael, he's very much the kind of law and order character. Like he has this idea of what is right and what is wrong, and no matter who gets hurt, empathy is less important than making sure that we're all following some agreed upon set of rules.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting though, because like you say, the other characters don't necessarily feel that same way. And so as we pass through the book, through the different perspectives of the different family members, that becomes a point of tension between them. And I wonder, I don't know, what was it like for you to sort of explore this family through each of the different characters? And were there some who offered you revelations you didn't see coming, or some who sort of felt more natural to you?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. Yeah, for me, so Lisa and Richard Starling began as characters in 2 of the stories in my first book, in Heaven of Animals. So I started the novel with them thinking they would be the easiest characters to write. And Lisa was easier for me. Like my heart is really with Lisa in a lot of these chapters. But Richard, who was really the narrator of the original stories, I didn't know who he was 30 years later. Like as a 69-year-old man, I couldn't quite get into his head. And as he tells the reader really early on in the novel, he's had this affair, and I couldn't figure out why he did that. And I was mad at him for doing that. and kind of judging him. And I think, I don't know, I mean, every author has a different kind of way of looking at this, but for me, if I'm judging my characters, I can't write them well. You know, when I'm in their heads, I want to be on their side. And so I had to take this real kind of look at who Richard was and why he'd done the thing he had done, and how he was dealing with his regret about that. So he was the hardest. I think Jake was also kind of tough. So Jake is Thad's boyfriend, and he's this painter, this real hot shot painter in Bushwick in New York. And he's enjoying a level of success that most of us as writers will never enjoy. You know, he's making all this money. And it was tough to find my way into his point of view and to imagine what it would be like to be so successful that you have no regard for anybody else, and then still find a way to make him kind of funny and likable and sympathetic. So I think cracking each character was just finding a way into empathy for that character.
I really think that's one of the truest delights of this book, is that it does, not only have you done that sort of for yourself as the writer, I think as the reader, we find these characters where it's like, well, I certainly don't want to have dinner with them, but I need to know everything about what they're going to say next and what they're going to do. And you understand them, even if you would never make the choices they make. And all of that contributes to this sort of like delicious tension in the book. And I think people could probably hear in that first chapter that there's a lot of tension, even in just that scene of watching this child on the boat. I was struck. I stayed up all night reading this book because I could not find a good place to stop, because every moment kept making me feel like, well, I gotta see what happens next. And so I think of that as a thing that story writers are really good at, and novelists are not always as good at. I wonder if you could talk about tension in the novel.
Yeah, I think what looks like tension is just the result of a lot of pages being cut. And I mean, I'm sure you know this too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the novel was almost twice as long. It was 525 pages, and now it comes in at like a much leaner 300. So it was really just scrapping the boring parts and the parts that, you know, where I thought I needed air in the novel, and I thought I just needed to kind of let it sort of give the reader some time off. And then ultimately my editor and I decided, no, like just keep the forward momentum, just drive it forward like you would a story. And yeah, I think it's made for a more heightened tension throughout. But I like that. I like hearing that you couldn't put it down.
Absolutely. I feel like that sort of, I don't know, it makes for a thrilling ride. And I feel like people don't talk enough about how much gets left on the cutting room floor. I think actually another part of what you're up to here that creates such tension and makes it such a compulsive read is the time structure. So it's taking place, and correct me if I flub this, over the course of sort of 3 days. So it's sort of Friday through Sunday.
Yeah.
We have 4 sections because there's sort of a Sunday evening section. But that time structure, you sort of keep us in close. I felt like I was at a wickedly funny play where you're sort of trapped with people over a long weekend, and you're like, how are they going to make it out of this weekend alive? How did the structure come to you, and was time part of your thinking with this book?
Oh yeah. If I could have made it shorter, I would have. If I could have made it plausible that all that stuff happened on one day, I might have. But I mean, I'm just a huge fan of circadian novels. I love the Odyssey. Ulysses. I love Mrs. Dalloway, Ian McEwan's Saturday. So I knew I wanted a very compressed timeline. And the first draft did take place over 4 days. The first day was Thursday. And before that opening chapter of the tragedy, there were 10 or 11 chapters. And it was just a whole day of the Starlings coming to the house, remembering things about the house. And then they get up Friday morning, they go on the water, and then this boy falls in the water. So, but after reading the first draft, my editor said, we don't need a whole day to see them gather. And I realized it was really just me figuring out the backstories of these characters to be able to write them. It was kind of like I was saying to the reader, just hold on for 100 pages and it'll get really good in chapter 11. And no reader is going to give you that, that benefit of that doubt, not for 100 pages. So once all those were gone, everything that had taken place on that day could just be, thrown in with a couple sentences on Friday. And the novel just starts with that really shocking beginning. So, but beyond that, the other, wait, I'm trying to remember. I had two answers. What was the original question?
I was just about
was,
the time structure, which I just find
yes,
fascinating.
and you said plays. That was the thing. I love plays. My wife and I go to New York. Well, before the pandemic, we would go to New York every summer we could and watch as many plays as possible, especially the plays of like Lucas Nath and Annie Baker. These plays where you get several characters into a fight, and then what I love about like Lucas Nath's plays, Dollhouse Part 2 or The Christians, you see one character talking and you're totally on their side. And then the other character starts arguing with them. You're like, oh no, wait, yeah, I'm on that character's side. And then the third character starts talking. You're like, oh no, I'm on her side. And you realize like, oh, there's no side. Like it's only in this 24-hour news cycle that we act like every argument has exactly two sides to it.
Yeah, a play that I was thinking of is one of my favorites, and I love the movie adaptation too, is August Osage.
August Osage County.
Oh, it's
Yes.
everyone out there, you need to watch it, you need to see it, it's delightful to read just the play itself as well. But what I think this book has in common with that is that all these family members are gathered back in a house and everyone has a secret. And then you put pressure, and the secrets keep coming out. And so I don't know, there are a lot of secrets in this book. A lot of family members keep secrets from one another or from, I don't know, there are all these moving, shifting alliances of who knows what. Could you talk about secrecy in families or secrets in the novel?
Sure, yeah. And well, I'll also just say I thought about that play all the time. And I would be lying if as I was writing Lisa, I wasn't imagining Meryl Streep. But yeah, no, secrets. I mean, so one of the working titles of this novel was Open Secrets. And then my editor, Sean Manning at Simon Schuster, who's brilliant, he's pointed out to me that that was an Alice Munro title already. And, you know, we can't steal from Alice Munro because she's the best. And plus I had already named a story collection after a James Dickey poem. So I did not want to be accused of being a serial title stealer. But yeah, no, I mean, I think every single family has this situation where you know certain secrets, you know, siblings are keeping secrets from parents and parents are keeping secrets from the kids, and often the secrets are divulged, but then, you know, we're trying to remember what we're supposed to know and who's supposed to know what. So, I mean, I think that's so universal in most cultures and for most people, that was just something that felt like it came naturally for the novel. The harder thing was trying to imagine how these secrets were going to get revealed. Like, could I make it plausible that Richard would admit to his son that he had an affair? Like, and under what circumstances would someone tell their son, by the way, I cheated on your mother? And so there were sort of, for the plot to work and for certain beats to work in the novel, I knew there would have to be moments when secrets would be revealed. And the challenge was figuring out psychologically why those revelations would come along. And you know, hopefully I did okay in that department. That was the hardest thing, though, was writing those moments and making it believable. That, you know, when Diane tells Lisa about her pregnancy in the bathroom, you know, those were the hardest moments to get right. Were those confessions, I guess, of secrets.
Yeah, I think that a thing that I thought those moments worked so well for me because it always felt like it was a thing that a person had about themselves that they weren't sure they trusted someone else to know about them, as a matter of almost identity. And I think so I am obsessed with Thad Starling. And so he and Jake, their relationship is one of my favorite plot lines in the book because I think it's a thing that doesn't get written about a lot. So it's an open relationship, but they sort of have conflicting feelings about the openness of the relationship and utilize it to different degrees. And I think there's a lot of really smart, candid writing about how these men love each other, but are trying to negotiate the terms of their relationship and what they're willing to talk to each other about versus what they're willing to tell their family about their life. I don't know. Could you talk a little bit about writing that relationship? Because I think it's really fresh and exciting that you did it.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, and I'm sure it's been done by others better than me. But it was, you know, I thought it would be hard to write about sexuality in the 21st century without, you know, having a gay relationship. It's just becoming so much more common, as it should. And one of the, you know, when the novel began, I began this novel in 2011, and one of the plot points was that Thad wanted to get married, but marriage, while it was legal in New York, or maybe they were still calling it civil unions at the time, it wasn't legal in America. And then 2015 rolled around, and happily marriage was legalized for everyone. And then that plot line suddenly seemed really quaint. And so I started talking to a bunch of friends and got a little bit past this kind of heteronormative thinking that, the end goal of all relationships has to be marriage. And so I sort of started exploring poly relationships and open relationships and talking to people about them, and got interested in writing about that. And early on, I was kind of writing Jake as the bad guy. So in this relationship, they're this couple with mismatched sex drives, and they really do love each other. But Dad would rather be in a monogamous relationship, and Jake would rather be in an open relationship. And so I kind of resented Jake for wanting to open up the relationship. So I started doing a lot of research, and I talked to a lot of people, and then I found this great, I think it was one of those Dear Abby type columns. I think it was Dan Savage. Someone had written in, and it was basically the Jake person in their relationship saying that they really love their partner, but they wanted to be open, and they were trying to persuade their partner to be open. And I think it was Dan Savage who said, you're going to have to choose. You're going to have to choose between exploring what being open means to you or being with this person. And I realized, oh, okay, so Jake isn't, the bad guy in this story. These are just people who are in an unfortunately mismatched relationship. They love each other, but the sort of heterosexual version might be, two people, one wants kids and one doesn't. It doesn't mean they don't love each other, but they have very different ideas of what life is going to look like. So once I had that, I realized, all right, this novel doesn't, their arc doesn't need to be one of will they or won't they, but it needs to be one where Thad is kind of offering Jake this opportunity, and he's saying to him, either you can be with me or you can go. The choice is yours. I can't make it for you. But it didn't need to be a situation of one of them was in the wrong. And I think once I realized that, I was able to write about their relationship more wisely and with more empathy for both of them.
I think that the book has a really wonderful movement from the sort of, here are the rules, here's what it means to be a starling according to Michael, this is what one does on the lake, one does not play Jimmy Buffett, but then it's sort of a broadening and a generosity that happens as the book moves on, being like, there are lots of ways to be a person, there are lots of ways to be a family, there are lots of ways to negotiate your relationships, and that movement from like the rigid into the more expansive, I think, is a pleasure of the book. And it's a book that tackles really relevant big issues, and so I'm interested in the fact that this is a book that, like, first of all, I wanted to stay up all night reading, but also it's like about death, and it's about art, and it's about sex and politics, and so I don't know, what does it mean to sort of bring in those bigger issues for you? Is it just something that comes up as a normal part of the writing process, or were there political things you wanted to tackle? I'm curious.
Yeah, no, I just wrote this Lit Hub piece about this, which is dealing with the fact that one of the reasons the novel took me 9 years was because I kept changing it, because the politics kept changing. As I'm sure you've noticed, everything in America changes about every week now. So, some of those original arguments around the dinner table were about McCain or Mitt Romney, and then, of course, after our current president was elected, those guys became terribly disinteresting, and suddenly there was this whole new monstrous thing to write about. So the novel kept evolving as America's politics kept changing, and I just felt like I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, but I knew I wanted to say something, and I knew that Michael, who's the Republican of the family, I knew he would have a lot of opinions, and I wanted to find a way to get those across without making him a caricature of like the kind of Republican we might think of. Someone who, he's fiscally conservative, but he has no problem with his brother being gay. That he is smart and he has done his research, but he's also sort of selfish and narrow-minded and isn't thinking about the impact on the rest of the world from, the choices Trump's making. So I wanted to be complicated and to sort of look at the nuance of, because I think all of us, most of us have those people in our family. Everyone has people from all sides of the aisle in their family, and we make allowances for, our grandparents, but then we don't make allowances for each other. So I wanted a novel that was kind of looking at all those characters. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? Okay.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And the part about the world changing at what seems to be an exponentially quicker and quicker rate these days, I think is something we're all going to have to wrap our heads around. This is totally just my own desire to talk about this at this point, so I apologize. But there is a scene that I am in love with where, so Thad has returned to this family summer place, and he's like, I'm looking for my comics collection. I know I left it here somewhere. And Lisa, the mother, is like, oh shit, because she has thrown away his comics. And he keeps looking and she keeps panicking. And so she goes into the comic book shop and tells them that she's thrown away his collection, that she wants to reassemble it for him. And they make everyone in the store come out. They're like, an urban legend is before us. Here is the mother who threw away her son's comics collection. And they're really, really cute. And they sort of team assemble and like help her do it. But I was just wondering, like, do you have a relationship with comics? Or if it's more interesting to talk about this sort of gesture of like, I lost something from my childhood and I'm looking for it. And then the mother is like trying to put it back together to give to him, is kind of a beautiful gesture too. I'm just interested in that scene because I love it.
Oh, thank you so much. That was one of my favorite scenes to write. No, I mean, luckily my mom, so my mom's a librarian, and I was a very resistant reader growing up. I hated books, I hated reading, and she tricked me. In middle school, she started buying me Batman comics and X-Men comics, and it did it. It got me reading. So I have this huge comic book collection, and I still read comics when I have the time, and I love to spend time in comic stores. But no, my mom did not throw out my collection. But it's always the horror story. You hear about these people who had thousands of comics in their attic that would have been worth tens of thousands of dollars, and then they just got thrown away. So I don't know where I came up with that idea that she would be the mom who did that, and then felt the urge to reassemble the collection. But I do spend so much time in comic stores, so it was really fun to imagine. And I think they really are. I mean, there's sort of the stereotype of the comic book guy from The Simpsons, but in reality, like, most comic book stores are these wildly diverse, like really fascinating places with people who are just passionate about the art they love. And I love being around anyone who's passionate about what they love. And so talking to people who love comics, you can go in and say, what's going on with the X-Men? And 3 people will come out and just talk to you about how excited they are or how angry they are about the latest plot developments in their favorite issues. And the X-Men were my book growing up. One of the harder things about writing Dad was that because he's younger than me by about 10 years, his X-Men are not my X-Men. And so I had to look at the books he would have read, and they were different. But yeah, I had a lot of fun thinking about the world from his point of view. And I mean, I know so many people, men and women, who learn to read by reading comics. So it didn't seem. I got one question once, like, why would a comic book kid turn into a poet? And I was just like, are you kidding? like what? They're not. To me, they're not that different. Like, it's all literature.
Yeah. Also, the Alan Moore Swamp Thing, which is my favorite thing, is basically just pages of poetry. So I resent that question. I wonder if you could talk about, I was going to ask you about influences in terms of writers who have meant a lot to you in terms of style or content, but now that we're talking about comics, if there are things that, like, in a broader way are meaningful to you as part of your writing process in terms of other art or like hiking or anything else that sort of, I don't know, feeds you creatively when you're working on a book like this, I'd love to know about that too.
Yeah, well, before the pandemic, I'd gotten really into exercise. I had joined a gym, and it would really help me to, if I would write and write and write, and then I would go and work out. And it was this great way to just kind of clear my head and then be able to fall asleep at night. And now we've been in quarantine for about 4 months, and I can take walks around my neighborhood and do push-ups or whatever, but it's not the same. It's not getting like a great workout. And so I feel I had somehow coupled my writing routine to my workout routine for about 2 years. And now with that gone, I feel like garbage all the time. Like, I feel like I can't write, I can't exercise, I can't. And because of that, I feel like I can't think normally. And I'm sure there's a lot of variables to that. But so, yeah, I mean, health in the last couple of years had been really important to me. I do love birds. I'm not a bird watcher. I'm kind of like an amateur bird lover. I know, you love birds as well. yeah, and living in Orlando, it's amazing because we're actually in Oviedo, which is more rural. So, we just watched a Sandhill crane mating dance the other night on our family walk. They do this fascinating thing where they tear the grass up out of the ground and they throw it. If you just Google it or YouTube it, yeah, you'll get two male cranes and they'll just start ripping up the grass, and whoever throws it highest like wins the love of the lady crane. And
I love that so much. Our novels both include a reference to like ornithology at Cornell, which is a thing
yes.
that I feel bonded to you through. I love that. I wonder, do you have things that in quarantine have brought you like new or surprising joys, as we have sort of had to give up our things that were our things from before? Maybe this is too bleak a question, but like asking for a friend, what's getting you through the day?
Yeah, I think part of it is entertaining our children. So my wife and I have 10-year-old daughters. They're twins, and their world has of course been turned upside down. They don't get to see their friends. I mean, they can Skype with their friends, but they don't get to play with their friends. We don't get to go to the public pool. So we've had to come up with new traditions, like getting them to start cooking has been fun. I like to cook, so cooking with my daughters has been kind of a new special thing. And then also, I guess with one scene in this novel involves the family playing spades, and we'd never thought to play cards with our kids. We just played, Candyland and stuff, but we taught them spades. And now my daughter and Izzy and I are this really good spades team. And we take my wife and Ellie down most nights. So most nights we play a game of spades, and it's really fun. That's become our new hobby in the evenings.
Oh my gosh, that is so wonderful. I will backtrack a little bit and bother you about influences, either
Oh,
specifically to
sure.
this book or in a more general way. I mean, are there writers who have, I don't know, sort of either shaped the way you wanted to write or who you're writing against, or people who sort of cracked open what you thought was possible?
Yeah. So, you know, so many. I mean, stylistically, like prose style wise, I am in love with the work of most recently, like Elizabeth McCracken and Lydia Millay. Those two writers, they just destroy me with their sentences. They're so careful at the sentence level. And then also Michael Cunningham. One book that was really influential for me writing this book is a novel about a curator, an art dealer, and it's called By Nightfall.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like his best reviewed book. I don't know. I think it's as good or better than The Hours. I wish everybody would read it. But particularly in that book, his use of the present tense third person is so good. And when I read that novel like 10 years ago, I thought, oh, you could do a whole novel, in present tense third person. And it doesn't have to sound like Updike writing Rabbit Run. Like it can be more lyrical and more interior. And that was a book I looked to a lot as I was writing this one. But then I'm also, I'm a Southern writer. I grew up in Georgia, and I've lived in Kentucky, and now I've been in Florida for 9 years. Although Orlando's not really the South; it's whatever Orlando is. But I've been in Florida for 9 years, and so I'm always reading, the Southern writers. I more than anything, I miss the News Stories from the South anthology. That was kind of the best American for the South. But that's where I learned to write. Before I went to grad school, for years I taught high school, and I would just read News Stories from the South every year. And that's where I was introduced to the work of like Ron Rash and Edward P. Jones and Joe McCorkle, Lee Smith, Kevin Wilson, ZZ Packer, so many writers who, some of whom I'm now lucky enough to call friends. I love the way they write about the South or about Appalachia or about the urban South. And so, yeah, I think for me, with this novel too, place is really important to me. And for some reason, I'm particularly drawn to the way that Southern writers represent place. I think it's an essential part of Southern writing.
Yeah. Is lake life, is that a thing that you have experienced as a person, or was it just the right setting for this book?
No, yeah. So growing up in Georgia, we would spend a week every summer in North Carolina on a lake called Lake Toxaway. So the novel set on Lake Christopher, it's just Lake Toxaway. It's exactly where it is, near Highlands and near Asheville. And I've even had a couple readers email me to say they were so excited because the ice cream parlor that's featured kind of hugely in the Highlands chapters was a real place that's now shut down. It was not, as far as I know, operated by a pot dealer, but It was. It was this beautiful ice cream parlor. It was 2 stories and it had a balcony that went over a river, and the river was just full of rainbow trout. It was just mad, and it was in the middle of nowhere. It was so cool. So yeah, and we would stay in this double wide trailer, this converted trailer house for a week every summer, and that place captured my imagination. And I did wind up going there for a weekend about 10 years ago is when I started the novel, just to go back, and it was just exactly as I left it. Everything is still there. The bust your butt or bust your ass falls is exactly as I described it. The lake, the marina, all those things. And yeah, I think just a place gets in my imagination, and then I want to write about it, even if I haven't been there in a decade.
So my other question to do with things that perhaps are of interest in your real life, but if this is nosy, you can tell me to stop asking, but it's art, and it's the art world. I'm actually really interested that you brought up the Cunningham book, because I love that book. And I was thinking of specifically the scene, I hope I'm remembering this right, a woman who has cancer goes to see the Damien Hirst shark. And it's sort of this moment of like, what does this work of art possibly have to offer this woman who is in sort of the realest possible moment of her life? And I feel like your book is so much like, here's tragedy, here are all of these big real things, but art still matters in the lives of these people too, certainly to Jake, but to others as well, including Diane. So I wonder, I don't know, what is your connection to art as a person who makes it or enjoys it, or how did it get into this book?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of me in every character, which is probably something that most writers say. I wanted to be a poet before I was a fiction writer, so there's some of me in Thad, and I wanted to be a painter or an illustrator before I wanted to be a poet. I mean, I was that guy who had 8 different majors my first 2 years of undergrad. So yeah, I still love drawing and sketching and illustrating. And I feel like if it's true that there are like a bunch of different parallel universes, there is some universe in which I did go to art school. There was a part of me that really wanted to go to the Savannah College of Art and Design growing up just outside of Atlanta. So yeah, I mean, I'm obsessed with the art world. I think it's fascinating. I don't know quite enough about it, but I did a lot of research for the novel. I definitely got a few details wrong at first. I remember my editor writing to me, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I think I had Jake living in Chelsea or something." And he was like, "Why would he live in Chelsea? He'd live in Bushwick." And I was like, "Okay, I don't know, but I know what art I like." But I'm fascinated by the way that the art markets are manipulated in New York, and the way that so much depends on who's representing you, and who the buyers are, and who can be sort of made to be interested in your art. And I guess that's true of every art, but it seems especially, or maybe a little more insidious in the painting world. So, I could imagine some sort of spin-off novel later on with Jake, just because I would love to explore that world more. But I was interested in this kind of triangle of there's Jake, who's made his living, and he is successful in New York, living the dream that every many young painters would want. And then there's his ex-boyfriend Marco, who has gone the more commercial route and who wants to paint, but he's willing to paint whatever tourists will buy in Asheville. And then there's Diane, who has not been successful, but she really enjoys being an art teacher. And that the chapter toward the end where Diane and Jake wind up painting together on the dock, that chapter came along really late in the drafting process. I had kind of made this challenge to myself that I wanted to try to get every character in scene with another character, and it didn't hit till almost the end of the book that Jake and Diane didn't have a chapter together, because they were the only 2 that aren't related in any way. And then as soon as I realized that, I thought that makes them the most interesting, because they're the only 2 who are choosing to be there. They didn't have to come for the family weekend. And so they have this thing in common. Then, of course, they also have in common that she would love to have his life, or she thinks she does, at least before they start talking about what it's like for him. And so, yeah, so I liked, writing this book about these 3 different painters and their different approaches, because there is no one way to live and do art, right?
I found that scene totally thrilling, and I thought maybe shades of Lily Briscoe in her, and I loved that moment very deeply. Hello.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Julie.
Hi, I'm back. It was like I was sitting in the background, like nodding the whole time. Like the first thing that you said, CJ, when you said, I'm obsessed with this book, I'm in the background going, yes, me too, me too. So we have a couple comments, and we're kind of coming to the end of the program here. Christy Clancy, I don't know if you're still on here with us. She is watching, and we're actually going to be hosting her for she's a debut author. We're hosting her on one of our couch surfing book tours, so she's joining in with us. And she made a comment that she said she loves CJ, the Crane Wife, that you wrote. So she loves that. She actually linked the Paris Review thing to it. And then she said she's loving lake life, Jamie. So, and I told her, I said, yes, so are we. So are we. So, yeah, here we go. Let's get that cover back up. It's just, I mean, it's just, the conversation tonight is so great because, and I think that people, after they read it, they can come back to this and get some little insight into what you were thinking when you were reading it. If they're not watching us right now, it's like after they buy it at the store, it's like, go watch that. You can see some of the behind the scenes of what this was all about. So it was a great conversation. So appreciate it. So CJ, if people are, and for people that joined us late, I just wanted to let everybody know that this is actually, I did record it. It's going to be on our YouTube channel, and it will stay resident on the Facebook page too. So you can always go back and look at if you missed part of the conversation, because we did have some people coming and going in it. So if they miss something, that they can always check back on that. But CJ, if anybody wants to follow you, what's your favorite form of staying in touch with your fans? Is it Facebook, Instagram, Twitter? Which?
My dog is very vocal on Instagram.
Love it.
And that is the extent of my social media, but he is the dog philosopher. And every so often I get very excited, and then I post about a book I love, and I just sort of prop the book on my dog. So if you would like my dog and my book recommendations, they come at the dog philosopher on Instagram.
Love that. Love it. And Jamie, how can people stay in touch with you if they want to find out more about the book or just get your thoughts on things?
Sure, yeah, it's DJ Poissant on Twitter and Instagram, and then David James Poissant, my full name, on Facebook.
Okay, perfect.
And then, yeah, davidjamespoissant.com online.
Okay, so they can, and all your stuff's there if they wanted, if they can find you that way too. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Jamie. It was such a pleasure meeting you. Like I said, I loved it. You got a mutual fan club here just with me and CJ, right? It's like, I was obsessed with this too. I was like, oh my God, I love this book. It's fantastic. So thank you for writing it.
No, thank you. And thank you, CJ, for talking to me. And thank you, Julie, for having us. And this was really awesome. I love this.
Excellent. All right. So I'm going to take us off of Facebook Live. Bye, everybody on the Facebook world. Thank you for joining in.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, that stream's done, and I will turn off our